Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. And a very perky Nigel today. He's on good form. But the garden is in a confused state, as well it might be, because we've had a funny old year. Here at Longmeadow, it was very cold and dry in May and June, and the national average was colder and drier than normal. And July and August were cold and wet, and unseasonably nippy. And plants have behaved slightly oddly as a result. We've got a whole mass of foxgloves flowering in autumn, whereas they should be flowering in spring. We've got hellebores flowering. Now, those normally would be at their best in February and March. But here we are, perfectly healthy plant, flowering really nicely, way out of season. It's not a disaster. It's not a sign of imminent collapse of the whole system of things. It's simply a plant that has gone off-piste. So don't worry if you see eccentricity in plant behaviour. Enjoy it, observe it, and then maybe over a period of time you can get a pattern that you can respond to. And I will be adding to the plants in this part of the garden at Longmeadow later on, and also I'm going to be celebrating those veg that have done really well this summer. This week, Rachel visits the WI in Bath to see what they're cooking up in their centenary year.
That is really good.
This makes me feel connected and proud to be a member of the Women's Institute.
I want another one. They're very good.
They are, aren't they?
And the garden designer, Matthew Wilson, has a plan to brighten up a north-facing wall in his new garden. It's bulb planting season, and I've got a terrific bulb here. For a start, it's a whopper. And this is a fritillaria persica, known as adiaman. And it's got wonderful, deep, rich, purple burgundy flowers. It will come back and back year after year. Now, these are not particularly cheap. Individually, they're going to cost you about £5. If you buy them by the dozen, you could probably knock that down to about £3. But in any event, they're not disposable. It's worth taking care to get them off to a really good start. I'm going to put them in here because although they come, as the name Persica implies, from Central Asia, around the Middle East, on mountainsides which are scorched in summer and well drained, they actually will thrive perfectly well in light shade. And essentially, that's what we have here. OK, let's get a spade. And I'll plant a clump of 3 bulbs. So the bucket-sized hole. This is not just a few inches below the ground. And the more stem is underground, the better and stronger it will grow. And this is quite a fleshy stem. So it does want to be somewhere where it's not going to be buffeted by the wind, because they can snap. Now I'm going to put a bit of grit under there so they don't sit in a puddle. There is a central hole in each bulb. Sometimes it's more marked than others. So if you plant them normally, with the top at the top and the roots at the bottom, there is a risk in very wet, heavy soil that actually they will rot, because water will get in the middle of the bulb, sit in it, and then they'll rot away. So it's a good idea to plant these on their side. So I'll just pop that one there like that. We'll put another one like that, and another one there. And even though they're on their side, the shoot will come out from the top, turn right angles, and come on up perfectly well. And that way, it ensures that they don't rot. If you've got very sandy soil, then you can plant them the right way up, normally. But if you've got any doubt at all, put them in on their side. And that's it. I'll just backfill over the top of that. I don't need to add any bone meal or any goodness like that at all. They're perfectly happy with this type of soil. and then just cover it over, label it, and they will start to appear in spring. I often feel that light shade is one of the best growing conditions in the garden, but real shade can be tricky, and you do have to choose very carefully to make the most of it. Now, Matthew Wilson has recently moved to a new house, and he has a shady wall to plant up.
Well, this is what I'm going to do today. I've got this north-facing wall. It's not particularly beautiful to look at. Some leftover camellias. I'm going to make some raised beds, plant the camellias, and turn it into a thing of beauty. A fork. Oh, we need a wood saw and the mattock.
I'm going to make my raised beds using wood that's reclaimed edging board, which I'm cutting to size. It should last for several years.
So this is really just loosening the material underneath, making sure the drainage is okay, and giving me a good workout at the same time.
And because I'm planting next to the house, there are a couple of extra things I need to bear in mind.
This is a damp-proof coarse membrane. Everything below that is effectively impermeable to the damp. What you should never do is get soil above the damp course. Now, if you've got any doubts about any of this, or your house is very old, or it's listed, or it doesn't have a damp-proof course at all, which is the case with some older properties, you should get some advice first.
And to build the beds, I'm simply screwing the 4 boards to 4 corner posts and making sure my sides are level. The first thing I'm adding to the bed is well-rotted manure and topsoil.
Now, my soil here is neutral, and camellias like neutral to acidic soil, so to be absolutely certain, I'm adding in some peat-free ericaceous compost. And this is really to ensure that they get all the right nutrients and minerals that they need to thrive.
With some help from the kitten, Banjo, my beds are ready to plant. I'm fixing training wires to the wall as high as I hope the camellia will eventually grow. To make sure they're secure, I always drill into the brick. And I like to make sure that the wires are really tight, so I secure one end of the wire using a barrel strainer or turnbuckle.
And you get that tight enough, you can play the theme from Deliverance. You know, the banjo thing. Perfect.
When planting in a bed like this, I always make sure the plants are really well firmed in.
You need to do it with your heel. Don't sort of faff around with your hands. You've got to make sure the roots are in contact with the soil. If there's too much loose soil around the roots, not only will the roots dry out, which is bad for the plant, but the whole thing will start to rock. And obviously, in this kind of situation where you've got a fairly narrow bed, it's really important to firm it in. Now, when I'm tying in plants, I put the tie on and then wind it around a few times to sort of make a spacer. And then I tie the plant in. If you tie a plant directly onto a galvanised wire, after a while, the plant can actually grow into the wire, and that obviously can weaken the plant and it can snap at that point.
Camellias will take hard pruning, so they're great for training into a narrow space, but they should only be pruned after flowering. I'm just giving them a quick tidy and removing the dead wood, as if I pruned now, I'd take off the flower buds that are already growing for next spring.
I think one of the challenges with planting anything against a north-facing wall is you're quite limited in the selection of plants that you can use. The moment you start thinking about shrubs as well as climbing plants, it opens up more possibilities, obviously camellia being one of them. The other thing to think about is plants that are too vigorous for the south or west facing aspects. Like this rose, we inherited this. It's Paul's Himalayan musk. Now, if that was on the southern side of the house, I'd never find the front door. It's such a vigorous plant, it really would race away and overtake the whole house. But here, those bad habits are controlled by it being in less than perfect conditions, but it still flowers really well and smells wonderful. Well, the camellias are looking really good, but I know the thing that's going to finish it off, and that's some underplanting. And this is one of my favourite plants, Brunnera Jack Frost. You've got this wonderful silver marking and green veining. Got the glossy leaves of the camellia reflecting light, and now the silvery leaves of the brunnera, and they're going to bounce light back as well, make the whole thing really feel light, lifted, and rather lovely.
And planting just one type of plant in this way, especially in a narrow bed, I'll get a coherent look that I really like.
Well, do you know what? I'm pretty pleased with that. It certainly lifted the whole wall and made it a lot more interesting to look at. And of course, it's only going to get better once these fill out and become pillars of flower, which they will do in winter time. It's going to look lovely, actually. No, I'm very pleased.
Increasingly, I'm seeing the possibilities of using shady woodland plants, and they can be applied to almost any kind of garden, because most British gardens, essentially, I think, are clearings in a wood, and it doesn't matter if that's the middle of a city or out in the country. A few are exceptions to that rule, but you can apply it to an awful lot of situations. And if you understand how woodland plants grow, it certainly helps you get the best from them in your garden. For example, clematis. This is Clematis flammula. Now, all clematis are essentially woodland plants, and that means they're growing in the shade of trees and shrubs on a nice, cool, leafy woodland floor. And then they grow up looking for the light, and they will flower in the light. And if you try and replicate that, you won't go far wrong with all clematis. Cool roots in the shade, and then sun for the flowers. And up through this apple tree, you can see the lovely froth of flower. I love it at the moment. Beautiful plant. Over here, I've got Clematis alba luxurians. And look, there is a white foxglove poking through the clematis, completely the wrong time of year. 3 cheers for that. The weather might have caused problems for gardeners, but actually quite a lot of the vegetable garden has been fine. Carrots, which can be quite tricky, both to germinate and to grow with all the problems of carrot fly, have been fine. This is Nantes. Now you can see there's a certain amount of splitting. And the reason for that is because the soil is a bit rich for carrots. They don't like rich soil. They do much better in sandy conditions, well drained, that hasn't been manured or composted for a couple of years. So that's what's caused them to split. The taste will be fine, and not all of them have gone that way. You see, look at that. We now get into the realm of funny shapes from carrots, which is endless amusement, but they're delicious to eat. So a good year for carrots, a good harvest. The beet family has loved this summer. Chard, growing really well. This is Swiss chard, so we'll cut some of that. You can either harvest them individually, or you can cut a whole plant, and then that's a meal. And it cooks down like spinach, so you need quite a lot of the leaves, but not so many of the stems. Beetroot have had a wonderful year. In fact, almost too wonderful, because I've got some really big ones here. You see, this one is enormous. If you've got really big beetroot like this, they can be a bit woody, but they juice brilliantly. So don't throw them away, don't waste them, but simply juice them. So I'll have a couple of these whoppers for the juice. Runner beans have been really good, and I think that's been a question of timing. It's a certain amount of luck involved in that, because you can't tell what the weather's going to be like. But I can tell that this basil has been a complete disaster. The quality is terrible, to be honest. So I'm actually going to pull all this up and ditch it. It is not worth cooking with it, because it doesn't taste good. And that's purely because it didn't have enough heat May, June, July, which it needed to get those oils going. So that's a failure. Cut your losses. Now, I don't regard this as a waste, throwing it away, because it doesn't make good food and it will make good compost. But when I was a child, I was very much brought up in the tradition that you wasted nothing. I remember the WI making jam out of everything and cakes. But the WI actually has become this very vibrant, modern institution. This year is the 100th anniversary. And Rachel has been along to see them.
I have extremely fond memories of the WI because my mother was a member when I was a child, and I remember sometimes being able to go to the meetings and take a little flower arrangement or a miniature garden, and I loved that. But the WI is now very much forging into the 21st century. It's all about being inclusive, about education, but still those core values of growing, cooking and preserving your own produce are very much there, and they're as fashionable and relevant now as they've ever been. Kitty Lambar is one of over 200,000 members of the WI and the head of a team of 7 women behind this pretty and productive garden in Royal Victoria Park in the heart of the city of Bath. Hello. This is a hive of activity. I feel I must be in the right place.
You certainly
And
are.
you're Kitty.
I am Kitty, and this is the Bath Women's Institute garden. The original ladies who started this 3 years ago decreed that everything should be edible. In a funny way, it made it easier.
We're in Bath, and there is a bath I've spotted in your garden. What's the thinking?
Bath is full of chamomile, and the flowers wave in the wind, and it looks just like a bubble bath. The Women's Institute started in Anglesey in Wales in 1915, and I wanted to depict that. That was my most important thing, really. And so I did a little Welsh cottage vegetable patch. The potatoes illustrate the roots of the Women's Institute, and the leeks illustrate Wales.
Of course.
And I hope that the ladies, if they came here today, would love what we've done.
This year is the 100th anniversary of the WI in the UK. It played a unique role in providing women with educational opportunities and the chance to learn new skills and campaign on important issues of the day. But one of its most vital original aims was to encourage women to grow and preserve food to supply a war-torn nation during the First and Second World Wars. I love the fact you can sit here on this bench and just sort of, the sage is right there.
Yeah.
Oh, so you've got that wonderful aroma, and you've really dotted them around, haven't you? Cottage garden style.
Yes, the flowers, the herbs, the vegetables, all muddled in together and jostling together.
Elaine, I bet many people wouldn't think of having dahlias included in a garden with an edible theme.
Lots of people don't realise you can eat the tubers.
So you eat the tubers,
Yes.
but you can also eat other parts of the plant?
Yes, the petals in Mexico are often made into colourful teas.
How do you get the very best from them?
Every few days we come and deadhead them so that we can
Yes.
keep them fresh.
So let me give you a hand and let's get rid of all these dead heads. Jean, I think it's quite an honour to be called the Charred Queen.
Yes.
They're such fantastic, versatile vegetables, though, aren't they?
Yes, they are, because the very small leaves can be used in salads, just as they are. And then the leaves, it's very much like spinach, so you lightly cook them. And then the stems are very nice in stir-fries.
Yes. And speaking as a keen flower arranger as well, I would keep those stems, you know, with the dark colouring,
Yes.
and cut those for arrangements.
Yeah,
I
because
think
they've got
they're
this lovely feathery effect as well. And this year we might even try and save some of the seed so that we can have a go at reusing it next year.
So very much in the Women's Institute ethos of not letting anything go to waste.
Yes, that's right. Yes, use the whole thing.
The WI is rightly famous for its chutneys and jams, and preserving and pickling are core skills for many members. Kitty and her gang are no exception. So it's back to Kitty's kitchen to pickle the runner beans. I bet not many people have thought of pickling runner beans. So talk me through the process.
It's incredibly simple. You boil the beans for 10 minutes. Meanwhile, you are dissolving 3/4 pound of granulated sugar with a pint of cider vinegar, but you can use whatever vinegar you like. Add some juniper berries to that liquid, and then you simply strain the beans, put the two together, bruise some ginger, add that, and a lovely sprig of aromatic mint. Leave it for 2 weeks and then enjoy. What do you think?
That is really good. Do you feel part of a sort of continuum? Because WI members have been pickling for 100 years now.
They have for 100 years, when every bean was precious. This makes me feel connected with them and proud to be a member of the Women's Institute.
I want another one. They're very
They
good.
are, aren't they?
I think the combination of runner bean pickle and the WI is heady stuff. Really good. Now, in the spirit of recycling, not wasting anything, it's a really good time of year to collect seed. And then you can sow that and use it, save yourself money. And also there's a real sense of continuity, of the garden renewing and regenerating itself as being part of the flow of gardening. So I'm just drifting through the garden sort of once a week at this time of year, seeing what seeds are ready. Perhaps the most obvious and also the most beautiful are poppy seeds. These are opium poppies. And they have this incredible architectural seed head that starts out with a really lovely glaucous matte texture, as beautiful often as the poppy itself. And then as it starts to dry, these holes at the top open out. And it's so beautifully designed because you have this protective dome above and these vents that the seeds can come out. So when it shakes in the wind, you can hear the seed. It's a beautiful and a really clever way of storing it. And of course, all you have to do is just cut the seed head off, holding it upright so they don't spill out. When you're collecting seed, don't use plastic or polythene. Always paper. It can be paper bags, it can be envelopes of any kind, because they can breathe a little bit. And any moisture that's in the seed head, the stem, or the seed itself can cause possible fungal problems. So paper is what you need. And simply turn it upside down. And pop it in. Lots of stuff is still flowering. It's not all going to seed. The dahlias and the cosmos and the cannas have got plenty of life in them yet. But behind them, I've got this foxglove. So if I cut that off like that, every one of these, thousands of little seeds, and each one of those seeds is a foxglove. So you can see that when you're growing from seed, the potential for raising really a lot of plants is fantastic. What I'm going to do is put that over there, and in he goes. Come on, Monsieur Nige. Seed heads of Aquilegias. Put them in there, and then cut them. In a good year, there are lots of large fruit of this Fiorentino Constelluto. This is not a good year, but that could give me the seed for a stunning harvest next year. Something, by the way, you want to do quite quickly is sorting out the chaff, cleaning them off, because the chaff, i.e. the husks and all the bits that don't form the germinating seed, have a potential to get a little bit mouldy, to have moisture, and that can damage the seed. So it's worth cleaning them up within weeks rather than months. As for the tomato, simply get a bit of kitchen towel, pop it on a plate or a tray or just a plastic container like that. And the easiest way to deal with it is simply cut it in half, and the riper the better, really. And there are the seeds, and you can just flip them out onto the paper. And at this stage, you can wash them and sieve them to get rid of this gelatinous surround, which slightly inhibits germination. But the easiest way to do it is let the paper soak it up until they dry. Then scrape them off the paper, rinse them in a sieve, let them dry thoroughly, and then store them in a paper envelope or bag, and they'll be ready to sow next February or March. And obviously label it so you remember. And the beauty of that is that having extracted the seed, you've got a tomato to eat. I have to say, I wish I could tell you that was delicious, but it wasn't. It was disappointing. Just slightly bland tomato. A tomato longing for the sun. Seeds tend to lose their ability to germinate with time, so I tend to keep seeds for about 2-3 years and then jettison them and just collect fresh. Well, that's collecting seed, and that's something that will continue over the next month or so. But here are some other jobs to do this weekend. Grazing rye is ideal at this time of year to enrich the soil with its dense root material, as well as providing a cover to stop weeds growing. Scatter the seeds thinly on well-prepared soil, then rake them over to cover them. They should germinate quickly while it's still warm, and then grow steadily over winter. Although agapanthus flowers best when their roots are constricted, sometimes they become too constrained and can even break the pot they're in. It's then time to divide them. I find using an old bread knife or an old saw ideal. Divide the plant up and repot each piece in a slightly larger pot with a gritty mix of compost, and it should be ready to flower next year. This is the perfect moment to make hardwood cuttings from roses. Choose a nice straight stem about the thickness of a pencil and strip the leaves off and divide it into lengths about 6 to 9 inches long. Cut the top of each piece at an angle so that you don't make the mistake of putting the cutting in upside down. Bury the cutting so that only an inch or two is above the surface of the gritty compost mix. Then put them somewhere sheltered where they can be left for at least a year before being potted on or transplanted. It might seem that summer is winding down and winter is remorselessly edging closer, but actually there's a lot of life in the garden yet, and in the vegetable garden. Plants like runner beans, French beans will go on producing really well, for another month or more. So keep harvesting. And if they're a bit old and a bit long, well, you've always got that WI recipe. There's pickle to be made. Anyway, I'll see you back here at Longmeadow next week. Till then, bye-bye.